January 15, 2026. This is the subject of these precautionary measures with Miguel Angel Perez. State Industrial Holdings Company, SEPI, from May 2018 to the present. With special attention to the processes of granting aid, subsidies, public shareholdings, business bailouts, and other financial support instruments managed directly or indirectly by that entity. Her appearance takes place in compliance with the Commission's work plan and in accordance with the provisions of Organic Law 5/1984 of May 24 regarding appearances before the investigation committees of the Congress and the Senate or of both chambers. In accordance with that law and under the terms of the summons that was notified to her, this Commission has required her appearance to provide information regarding the subject of the parliamentary investigation, with the witness being bound by that obligation. This obligation arises from Article 502.3 of the Penal Code, which requires her not to be untruthful in her testimony. All of this is without prejudice to the constitutional rights of the witness. She has also been informed, in accordance with the provisions of that law, of the possibility of appearing accompanied by a person to assist her. Regarding the proceedings, which are public in nature as established in Articles 75.1 and 190 of the Rules of the Senate, the witness will answer the questions that are asked of her, the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups. Therefore, we begin with remarks by the parliamentary groups to ask Mr. Fernández the corresponding questions. First of all, as the sponsoring group, Senator Camps de Besa from the Popular Parliamentary Group has the floor. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, you appear today for the second time before this committee, not before this committee, but before an investigative committee of this chamber. The first time you appeared was on July 22, 2025. You came and did not answer any questions. You left unanswered all the questions that were asked of you in the inquiry committee into what we know as the Coldo case. Today you return, and we will see if you are willing to do something more than just occupy a seat in this committee. Because it's best to make everything clear from the very first minute. This is not just a formality, Mr. Fernández Guerrero. This is a matter of democratic oversight. And that oversight has rules. You may choose not to answer anything that might incriminate you, but you cannot turn that right into total silence. You cannot use that right as a shield to avoid any question, because the right to remain silent is exercised question by question. And I will remind Madam President of that. But it cannot be exercised as a general refusal. And that is why, throughout this speech, I am going to ask you specific questions based on facts arranged in chronological order. And to each one of them, your answer or your silence will have value. Because in this chamber, Mr. Fernando Fernández Guerrero, silence does not erase the facts. It highlights them, and sometimes it confirms them. In your previous appearance, you used your procedural situation in the Aznar-Aznalcóllar case as an excuse. That excuse disappeared on December 5th, 2025, when you were acquitted. But today, 5 days later, on December 10th, you were arrested again. And today he appears again under investigation in another case. Since you stopped being president of SEPI back in October 2019, you have only not been under investigation for 5 days. 5 days, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, 5 days between one case and another. And in any of the events, the exhibition has been well organized. Now they run away. The fact that today you are once again under investigation does not change the essential point I have already mentioned. The right to a defense cannot turn into blanket silence. It cannot justify an indiscriminate refusal to answer. And besides, you are aware of it, and I remind you of it in this chamber. You are not being investigated for events prior to the year 2021. You have no excuse for claiming there's an open investigation into events before 2021. But then, if you remain silent, we would not be facing the exercise of a right, but rather a way to evade parliamentary oversight. But I'll tell you something even more relevant. You appeared before Judge Santiago Pedraz of Court Number 6 of the National Court, and there you did testify. You did answer questions. And what you did was, precisely according to the press reports we have, deny the facts. Before the judge, he spoke. Will he stay silent before this commission today? If he stays silent before this commission, my question becomes inevitable. If you answered questions of this same nature in court and do not do so here, I can only draw one conclusion. If what you said there is true, you have no reason not to repeat it here. And if your version of the facts is not as described, you have no reason not to deny them here as well. But if today you remain silent in response to questions that you did answer in court, it's because you can't maintain here what you said there. It's because here, where you are obligated to tell the truth, you can't simply repeat the version you gave before the judge. And that's why I'm asking you very clearly, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, are you going to answer the questions from the members of this commission today?
Good morning, Madam President, Senators. In exercising the constitutional rights that protect me, and also as a consequence of the specific circumstances of the judicial procedure in which I am involved, in which we have been ordered to keep all proceedings in that case confidential, on the advice of my legal counsel and with deep regret, with absolute respect for the institutional authority of the Senate, of this chamber, of this commission, and of all of you. I cannot and should not answer the questions you ask me. I am very sorry.
Mr. Fernando Fernández Guerrero, you are under investigation for events after the year 2021. I am going to ask you questions about events that happened long before this date, but I will also ask you about events after this date since you testified before the judge. As you said you won't answer, I repeat my point. Did you lie before the judge, or is it here where you can no longer stick to that version you gave in court?
I refer to my initial statement.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, to the Andalusian regional government. I'm not asking you, I'm stating a fact. You were appointed Secretary General of Innovation, Industry and Energy in the Regional Ministry of Economy, Innovation, Science and Employment of the Andalusian Regional Government on December 28, 2012. At that time, Ms. Maria Jesus Montero was Minister of Health and Social Welfare. I'll ask you again in the same way as before, brilliantly, by the way, like my colleague Senator Bernabe did when you appeared before the Commission, Coldo. Did you already know Ms. Maria Jesus Montero at that time?
I'm going to refer to my initial statement.
Let me remind you that we are talking about events that happened long before 2021. They are not covered by any judicial secrecy order.
I'm sorry, sir, but I'll refer to my initial statement.
Your explanation isn't valid, and you know that as a lawyer. I shouldn't have to remind you. We're both lawyers, and you know this. You are using a subterfuge because you are not protected by the status of being investigated in a judicial process that has nothing to do with events prior to 2021. Anyway, don't tell me if you knew Ms. Maria Jesus Montero when you were appointed Secretary General of Innovation, Industry and Energy. Therefore, you also won't tell me what the nature of that relationship was, nor whether there was already a previous professional or personal relationship. Both of you served in the same government, she as a regional minister and you as Secretary General. Let me take it further. Ms. Maria Jesus Montero, already as the Minister of Finance and Public Administration, proposes you as the Comptroller General of the Government of Andalusia. That's a fact. I'm not asking you anything at all. The Council of Government approved the appointment effective February 2, 2016. Was it Ms. Montero herself who proposed you for that position? No.
No. I refer to my initial statement, sir.
Did she tell you directly?
Excuse me, Mr. Camps. Mr. Fernandez, you are also required to cooperate with this investigation. And when the senator asks you questions that concern your constitutional rights, I believe you should answer.
With all due respect, Madam President, the constitutional rights and the nature of the investigation being conducted lead me, on the advice of my legal counsel, to refrain from answering in this committee, and I regret it very much.
Thank you. Mr. Fernández Guerrero, are you aware there's currently no constitutional right stopping me from asking you? If you disagree, can you cite it? Far beyond Article 24 of the Constitution and effective judicial protection, because asking you if you knew Mrs. Montero does not incriminate you at all. If I ask you whether she directly told you that she was going to appoint you as the Comptroller General of the Government of Andalusia, it does not incriminate you at all. If I ask whether she acted through a third party, it doesn't incriminate you. But if you stay silent, you're hiding facts, which must have a reason. I'll continue. I will ask you again as well. You don't need to recite a litany at me. Just remain silent if you're not going to answer. Did Mrs. Montero, at the time of that appointment, have knowledge of the issues that were already arising in relation to the judicial proceedings regarding the Asno Collar mine tender? She fully knew the situation when she appointed him Comptroller General of the Junta of Andalusia. Did she have full knowledge? You are not answering, but I am telling you that she should have had it because it was a public case. And appointments in the administration are not neutral. They're always driven by a specific motive that results in a concrete decision. These questions aren't new. Senator Bernabe already asked them. They reiterate previously raised issues. You can explain yourself today, but you didn't before and still aren't now. That lack of transparency can only lead us to one conclusion. Because I'm asking you, without affecting your right to a defense, I'm asking you questions that don't incriminate you and therefore don't justify you remaining silent. I'm asking you about things that should be obvious to you, and yet you still don't answer. But let's move on to SEPI now. You were appointed President of SEPI in June 2018 by a Council of Ministers decision on the proposal of Finance Minister Maria Jesus Montero, later published in the official State Gazette. But before that appointment, as with any appointment, there is always a prior phase. And I ask you, who contacted you to offer you the position? Was it directly Ms. Montero? Was it someone else? Was that offer made within the Ministry of Finance? Or was it a proposal that came to you directly from the Prime Minister's office? Did they present it as a possibility or a final decision? Were any conditions set for you or specific objectives given for that appointment? Were you told what line you were expected to follow as head of SEPI? What I do know is that it's obvious that you accepted, whoever it was that made the offer. And you are appointed. Who finally informed you that you had been appointed? Was it Doña Maria Jesus Montero herself, or did someone else tell you after the Council of Ministers? We're discussing the leadership of our country's top public holding company. You led it, were responsible, and now you're silent before this commission. Mr. Bartolome Lora, who is also under investigation at this time, spoke yesterday and answered questions about his time as president of that public holding company. Ms. Belengualda did so at the beginning of the week and also spoke. You were president of SEPI, and remaining silent about your time as president of SEPI can only lead us to one conclusion. You remain silent because you are hiding something, and you are hiding something because you did something that truly carries criminal responsibility according to your own theory of remaining silent here today. If you had criminal responsibility, this would start to prove us right on serious matters. Mr. Fernández Guerrero, it's obvious that Ms. Maria Jesus Montero was decisive in your appointment. But it wasn't an isolated incident. With you from the Junta de Andalucía, from the Andalusian administration, many more high-ranking officials came. I'm going to ask you, and I'll say it very quickly because you're not going to answer, something as obvious and as non-incriminating as whether you already knew Carlos Moreno Medina, Chief of Staff to Maria Jesus Montero, and member of the Board of Directors of SEPI. To Inés María Bardón Rafael, Secretary of State for Finance, María José Gualda Romero, former Secretary of State for Budgets, and María del Pilar Paneque Sosa, former Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance. To Susana Sarriazo Peña, President of Navantia, to Belén Gualda, her successor, to Ricardo Domínguez García Vaquero, who succeeded Ms. Gualda as President. To Jesús Casas Grande, to Francisco Antonio Blanco Ángel, to Antonio Miguel Cervera Guerrero, to María Luisa Faneca López, to Juan Andrés Tobar. All of them were high-ranking officials of the Andalusian administration, and all of them came with you to the Ministry of Finance or to SEPI. You could now ask if he confirms that situation for me. It has nothing to do with any incriminating matter. I see you are not going to do it. No, you don't even answer the obvious. I'm not referring to single names, but to a chain of appointments. And by the way, regarding those who were appointed as presidents or top executives in SEPI, did you take part in those appointments? Can't you even tell us today if you, as president of SEPI, took part in the appointment of the top executives of the companies in which SEPI holds shares? Is that it? Are you staying silent? Well, look, I'm going to focus on your time as president of SEPI. In that role, you have no reason not to answer unless I've already committed some criminal offense, which I don't see, but you remain silent. Look, let's see what you did. According to what the Objective has published, you had told people you trust the most that your task was to liquidate SEPI by selling off its assets. You had stated that this was an instruction from the government, coming from the Ministry of Finance and from Moncloa itself. Did you have that assignment, and who gave it to you? Or are you still silent because you can't explain it here as clearly as you did to your own group? You share things with your circle, but don't think we, representing the Spanish people, deserve to know the same. Have you already said it? Mr. Fernando Guerrero, who were your contacts at that time in the Prime Minister's office? The Chief of Staff, Ms. Ivan Redondo, Mr. Manuel de la Rocha? Were they the ones who told you that you should promote the sale of real estate assets of the SEPI Group? Was there a written order, or was it simply a verbal order? The truth is that in that context, yes, it did happen. Of asset sales, of reorganization of public assets, and of making decisions about operations of great economic importance where particularly sensitive scenarios began to emerge. Because those are the kinds of processes where opportunities are created, where intermediaries appear, and where interests that are not aligned with the public interest can also emerge. Let me ask you, was it at that moment when you became aware that those decisions could give rise to dynamics that went beyond mere management? Was it public? Look, your silence here doesn't protect you. It doesn't protect you at all. What it does is confirm. I'll ask you again. Was your mandate at the head of SEPI aimed at preserving the public sector or proceeding with its liquidation? Given your silence, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, I'll continue. I'll move forward in the timeline. Provincial Court of Seville. Order to reopen dated October 1, 2019. It expressly orders your summons as a suspect in the case known as the Aznar Aznalcóllar case. And from that moment on, you offered your position to the government and the government accepted your resignation. That is your version. Ms. Maria Jesus Montero's version is that you were dismissed. Which one is true? You're not even defending your own version. Mrs. Maria Jesus Montero now says this gentleman is you. Someone she barely knows because she says she hasn't had any contact with you since she dismissed you as president of SEPI, you know? She has no record of any relationship with you since then. She says she hasn't seen you again. I ask you, is that true? After your SEPI dismissal, Duzan asks, have you met or spoken with Maria Jesus Montero again or kept any contact with them? Verbal ones? By letter, emails, phone conversations? No. Look, did you offer your resignation to the government or were you dismissed? For these purposes, it makes no difference to me. Could you explain to me if you verbally presented your decision, your resignation, if it was in writing, if you addressed it directly to Ms. Maria Jesus Montero or not? But I see that you're not going to clarify any of this for us. But I can ask you, and that would be perfectly normal. If at that time you requested any report within SEPI itself from the legal department on whether you, given your status as being investigated and soon to be accused in this procedure, if you had to resign? What you did do, though, was handle it externally. I'll ask you the questions in quick succession. Because at that moment is when you come into contact, and here I state I'm not asking you come into contact with Ms. Lear Diaz, known as the fixer of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. I could ask when you met her, but you won't say. If you met with her then, saw her in a SEPI hallway, or if she already worked at INUSA, you won't answer that either. None of that concerns you. I would leave that out. I could also ask you who put you in contact with Ms. Diaz, but you won't tell me, and whether Ms. Maria Jesus Montero was aware of that relationship, which is important. But what I will tell you is that Ms. Lear Diaz worked as the head of communications at INUSA, a company under SEPI, from October 2018 to December 2021. And do you know, regardless of whether they knew each other or not at that time, what Ms. Diaz did during that period? She acted as your communications strategist, Mr. Fernando Fernández, strengthening your position through public messages, statements, and media pressure. Do you know who she was putting pressure on? Emerita Resource. Do you know who Emerita Resource was? You know perfectly well. The company that filed the complaint which led to the Aznar Aznalcóllar case and your upcoming trial. And it turns out that Ms. Lear Diaz appears contacting journalists to promote a favorable narrative for your acquittal in the Aznar Aznalcóllar case. She even wrote a note titled The Revolving Doors of Emerita Resource, aimed at discrediting that company. I could ask you if you know her, but you're not going to answer me. I dare to say yes, it was for your benefit. Were you also aware of the leaked recordings of Ms. Diaz, in which she mentions coordinating actions to discredit Emerita under instructions from Ms. Montero? They were for your benefit, Mr. Fernández de Herrero. and you don't answer, and I say yes. But there's something I'd like to ask you. Mrs. Diaz was obviously doing things that benefited you. In other words, can it be said that she was working for you? Did she pay you? Did she work for your benefit for free? Were you paid by third parties? Or was it part of the services you provided as a fixer for the Socialist Party? Or worse, that would be a crime. I'll just assume you won't answer. Was Mrs. Diaz being paid by a state-owned company while performing tasks that had nothing to do with her duties? If she did it in her free time, it wouldn't be embezzlement of public funds. But if she did it during the time she was supposed to be working for INUSA, then it would be. And all of this seems to have been carried out under the instructions of Mrs. Montero. Mrs. Montero assigned Mrs. Diaz to you to clean up your image so that you could become president of SEPI again. Was there a plan to rehabilitate you and appoint you as president of SEPI again? Was it Mrs. Montero's unilateral decision, or did you agree on it with her? Are we going to leave the SEPI presidency vacant, and as soon as the Asno Collar case is resolved, will I become president of SEPI again? Because that's what happened, Mr. Fernández de Guerrero. The presidency of SEPI remained vacant for 18 months. That had never happened before in the history of that company or any government of Spain. You leave the presidency of SEPI, it remains without a president for more than a year and a half, 528 days, and you're not going to tell me here today who made the decision to keep the presidency of SEPI vacant during that entire period. And it's not incriminating at all. If you're quiet, you're hiding something. And you hide it because what you don't want is to clearly determine the political, not criminal, responsibility of the person who made the decision for the SEPI presidency to remain vacant for a year and a half. The logical step would have been to appoint a replacement right away. But look, let's see what happened during all that time. During all that time, did you maintain or have contact with high-ranking government officials? Did you communicate with SEPI group executives or those in charge? Did you keep getting information, including sensitive details, from the entity? Were you kept up to date, in other words, informed about the matters, at least the most relevant ones? I'll take it a step further. Did you directly or indirectly influence decisions affecting SEPI or companies in which it held stakes during this period? Look, on a more practical level, did you keep the official car, the secretary, the corporate email account? Did you visit companies in which the public business holding had stakes after your resignation? Yesterday, in this very room, Mr. Bartolome Lora said that he met with you after you had stopped being president of SEPI. Mr. Bartolome Lora, acting president, meets with you. And when he was asked if it was, and later an office will come up repeatedly, at Diego de Leon 36, 6th floor right, he said no, that he met with you at SEPI itself with you. Aren't you going to answer either? Do you deny it? Or does your refusal mean that Mr. Bartolome Lora told the truth yesterday and you were meeting at SEPI with its acting president? I imagine it was obviously to discuss matters related to the previous president of SEPI and the acting president of SEPI at that time. If you remain silent, then Mr. Lora told the truth. We are clearly facing arbitrariness, abuse of power, and irregularity. Look, we're going to find out. Could you clearly tell me today when you officially gave up your access to SEPI's intranet system? That's something we're going to find out. You could reveal it here today. There are reports saying that you joined the Andalusian regional government as a legal advisor on special assignment right after stepping down, and that in 2020 you moved to the central services. Is that true? Or do you also think that asking whether you rejoined the Andalusian regional government as a legal advisor incriminates you? I'll take the information as correct. You joined as a legal advisor, but I'm asking you this. How is it possible that a legal advisor from the Junta de Andalucía at the same time acts as the shadow president of SEPI with documented meetings with the interim president? But I have more questions for you. Now the so-called parallel office comes up. Diego de Leon Street, number 36, 6th floor on the right. I'm asking you clearly, and there's nothing wrong with that. Did you set up an office at that location after you left SEPI? Thank you. Your silence leads me to conclude that you did. What I don't know is whether you were the tenant, whether you were the one paying the rent, whether meetings related to public decisions were held there, and that's why I'm asking you. And among those meetings, were there negotiations related to the bailouts of Air Europa or Plus Ultra? Are you comfortable with the fact that in that same office, meetings were held with companies interested in obtaining financing or bailouts managed by SEPI? Are you comfortable with people linked to SEPI and those processes, such as Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido, who is identified as one of those who regularly attended that office, and was at the same time Deputy Director of FAZE and Deputy Director of SEPI's Equity Holdings Directorate, and who claimed to be your partner? And then we'll talk about the training emails. They appeared at SEPI. Did you frequent that office? From that office, did you offer intermediation services related to access to public funding? Are you aware that those services included the setting of monthly fees and success bonuses linked to the amount of funding? Later, I will tell you the exact figures and the exact percentages that were charged in writing. Does 7,000 euros a month and 2% as a transaction bonus sound familiar to you? Or will you stay silent today? Because that situation is hard to explain without at least contradicting yourself. Mr. Fernández Guerrero, if meetings with senior SEPI executives were being held from an office outside the official structure, if operations related to public financing were being discussed in that office, if people connected to SEPI itself were involved in that environment, if all of this was happening together, what mechanisms of intermediation were linked to access to public resources? This is no small question, and it's very simple. You are not going to answer it. But we wouldn't be looking at an isolated irregularity. Maybe we're facing something much more serious. The existence of a decision-making center outside the institutional structure, the private use of public resources, and the exercise of power without formal responsibility. That's why I'm asking you again very clearly. Were you in fact acting as the shadow president of SEPI? Or are you going to deny one by one all the facts that I have been listing for you? Your silence is conclusive, Mr. Fernández Guerrero. Look, let me introduce a new aspect, UCO report, published in El Debate on December 2nd, 2024. On January 21, 2020, a meeting was set at a house in Conde de Orgaz to discuss building a Venezuelan crude oil refinery. You are listed among the people summoned, Mr. Vicente Fernández Guerrero, legal advisor to the Junta de Andalucía and former president of SEPI. They gave you quite the titles, with Mr. José Luis Ábalos, Mr. Victor Aldama, and Ms. Delcy Rodriguez. Were you aware of this summons? Who summoned you to this meeting? Yeah. The meeting did not happen, I can tell you. But you're going to tell me if you knew, obviously you did, Mr. José Luis Ábalos. I mean, if you knew him personally, if you knew who he was. But you did know him personally and had meetings with him. Mr. Victor Aldama, Ms. Delcy Rodriguez, did you ever meet with her on any occasion? And more importantly, did you attend these kinds of meetings on your own behalf or on behalf of Ms. Maria Jesus Montero? Look, you could easily deny it here today and say that you have no knowledge of or involvement in those situations where your name appears. It's so easy, but you still don't do it. And by not doing it, we can only draw one conclusion. I'm going to bring up a new point. There have also been publications, in this case in the OJT, that talked about regular meetings at the official residence of Minister Ábalos on Balvina Valverde Street. Mr. Santos Cardan, Ms. Lera Diaz, you and the minister attended. Can you deny that they took place? Can you deny they were together there? If those meetings happened, what were they for? Look, they were taking place at the same time as those that were happening at 36 Diego de Leon. It seemed as if there were two headquarters. a more operational one at 36 Diego de Leon, and another one, more political, at Minister Abalos' own residence. But let's go further. The Solvency Support Fund for Strategic Companies was created on July 3rd, 2020. Did you find out like I did through the official State Gazette, or did you have prior knowledge before it was set up? Did you have any direct or indirect involvement in the definition or operation of that fund? Were decisions slowed down as a result of the vacant position in the presidency of SEPI? Yesterday they told us no. But it's very striking that months after its establishment, only one company had been granted funding, Air Europa. Were you involved in that situation? Did you influence directly or indirectly which bailouts were halted? And which ones were expedited between March 2020 and March 2021? Thank you. Did you know anything specifically about the Air Europa rescue? And about the one for Plus Ultra? Did you have contact with SEPI officials during that period? We know you did, with Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido. And no less than that, she was the Deputy Director of FACE and the Deputy Director of the Holdings Division. And I'll add another name, Mr. Parte Arroyo, the Director of Holdings. He was also one of those who came by Diego de Leon, 36, 6th floor, right-hand office. Did you ever think about pursuing more strategic bailouts? Did you keep in touch with Mr. Bartolome Lora or Ms. Maria Jesus Montero to influence these decisions? We already knew that you met with Mr. Bartolome Lora. We know that you met with him at SEPI. Did you ever talk about it with Maria Jesus Montero? Or with other high-ranking officials? Or with other SEPI senior executives? You know Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido, don't you? Don't you want to explain to me what kind of relationship you had with her? How long had that relationship been going on? Was it strictly professional within SEPI, or did it also extend to your private life? You haven't explained why this person was going to the office at 36 Diego de Leon Street, 6th floor, right-hand office? I'm asking you very clearly. Can you deny that she acted as your collaborator or partner on your behalf during that period of activity, during the SEPI period and the vacant seat? Look, Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido, for your information, not because you don't know, but for the information of the honorable members, she was removed from SEPI in May 2024 due to an incompatibility arising from external activities. Can you deny that those external activities for which she was removed from SEPI due to incompatibility were related to your circle? With your professional circle? Business with? Did you not know, or can you deny that contract proposals were sent to companies interested in accessing SEPI's closure through Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido? Thank you. Thank you. Here comes a new company, Mediaciones Martinez SL. Later, another appears. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. And later, a new one that is, I can't ask you if you were aware of it, with knowledge and involvement because you were the sole administrator. Thank you, Mr. President. Look, someone has, thank you, Mr. President. That's the fact. Thank you, Mr. President. Mediaciones Martinez SL, when it came to collecting the commissions that resulted from the operations in which you were involved as, quote, professional advisors from that office. And all this while you were formerly a lawyer for the Andalusian regional government. Mr. Parte Arroyo, Director of Subsidiaries at SEPI, you know him. We know the relationship he had with you, the communication. He was someone you trusted within the SEPI structure. And look, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Parte Arroyo was the one who requested the legal and financial reports necessary for processing operations like the bailouts of Air Europa and Plus Ultra. Whether they were prepared inside or outside SEPI, whether they were prepared inside or outside the Solvency Support Fund for Strategic Companies. That gentleman, with that importance, with that mandate, with that mission, was the one who constantly went to Diego de Leon, number 36, 6th floor right, to meet with you, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, and if not, deny it to me. to hold meetings of this kind related to bailouts and related to the financing of many more companies. All those operations are currently under investigation, that's right, in the National Court. And by the way, Mr. Parte Arroyo was also removed from SEPI. In May 2024, also, Ms. Garrido, Mr. Parte Arroyo, are you really going to keep denying that this office functioned as a meeting point where decisions were discussed that were not made through SEPI's formal channels? Mr. Fernando Guerrero, if you didn't have any formal responsibility, if you didn't hold any position, and if nevertheless you knew about, influenced, or intervened in decisions that affected bailouts financed with public money, the question, look, is no longer whether you participated or not. The question is from where you were doing it. Thank you. It certainly wasn't from within the institutional structure. You were no longer part of it. That's impossible. You were doing it from a parallel sphere. That's what I've been describing throughout this entire questioning. But look, I'll go further. On March 30, 2021, Ms. Belén Guelda was appointed president of SEPI, another person from the Andalusian government and administration. You already knew you would stand trial for the Aznal collar case. You knew about it since at least February 2021. If at that moment you choose to leave your role as legal counsel for the Junta de Andalucía and begin private sector activities, that's fully legal. I have nothing to say about that. But why do you make that decision at that particular moment? Why in May of 21? According to the UCO reports, between 2021 and 2023 is when the operations linked to state-owned companies that are being investigated in the National Court take place. See? When do they start? 2021. When do you start your private sector activities? 2021, May of 2021. The relationship seems quite obvious, but we'll see, because at first it's only a temporal relationship. Let's go further. On May 19, 2021, you received authorization from the Office of Conflicts of Interest to join two companies, Servinabar 2000 SL and Martínez de Echevarría Abogados, one in Seville, the other in Pamplona. After being involved in very high-level public decisions, you joined a construction and civil works company and a law firm. You should clarify this today. I see that's not going to be the case, but I'll leave some questions hanging. What steps are you taking to look for that new job? Okay. You decide to move to the private sector? Why? You end up at those two companies. Who do you contact for those opportunities? Or do those opportunities come to you from someone else? I'm going to explain it to you very clearly. Do you search for the job, or does someone find it for you? He can't answer that either. Mr. Fernández Guerrero, how did you end up at a company with fewer than 10 employees based in Pamplona, outside the legal field, and with a turnover of around 1 million euros? How long have you known the company's sole director, Mr. Anchon Alonso Egorola? Who introduced you to him? Did Mr. Santos Cerdan or Ms. Lair Diaz get involved? Were you aware at the time you joined that Mr. Santos Cerdan had acquired shares in that company through a private contract that was not notarized? When you started working at Servinavar, did you know exactly who the owners of Servinavar 2000 SL were? And what hasn't been clear to me, and I've looked in several places, what exactly was your role within the company? Commercial director, external advisor? What was your employment arrangement? Did you receive a fixed salary, a variable one, or both? From where did you perform your duties? From Universidad Pamplona, Madrid? I know you've lived in Madrid, even while working as a lawyer for the Junta de Andalucía. We will find out about the apartments you had rented. But tell me, working for Servinavar, probably living in Madrid, and also working at a law firm in Seville, which company were you associated with while performing all these duties? Which operations did you manage? Aren't you able to explain it? It's a job. Allow me to return to the property at 36 Diego Leon Street. You didn't want to answer. I conclude that this property was rented by you in October 2019, either by you or by someone who made it available to you. You wouldn't say who paid the rent. But it is true that there are reports that, starting in 2021, that property appears to be rented by Servanava 2000 SL. Is that true? Were you still the tenant, or did the company you worked for become the tenant? Who was ultimately paying that rent? Was it you, the third party, who may have helped you at the beginning or from 2021 onwards, Servanava 2000 SL? Paying a rental fee is not a crime. Look, I'm going to quickly tell you what happened in that office from that moment on. From that moment on, that office became a multi-purpose space. In the morning, you had dealings with people around SEPI, already working for Servinava, related to the scheme being investigated by the National Court. Ms. Lair Diaz and Mr. Santos Cerdan would meet in that office in the afternoon. According to reports, they gathered IBEX executives whom they extorted by demanding large sums of money under threats that it would affect national security. On these various matters, you told the media that you merely handed over the keys to that office. And at night, it became a safe house for the Socialist Party, for the Socialist Party's underground operations, through which many people passed. And it is confirmed, former socialist judge like José Luis Sáenz de Tejada. Some businessmen, some more prosecutors, in order to, in turn, try to intimidate other judges and prosecutors, always so that they would secure favorable outcomes for the Socialist Party. If those office walls could talk, Mr. Fernando de Guerrero, imagine how much they'd clarify for us, right? You are just as silent as they are, you know? But look, you were later arrested on December 10, 2025. Also, there's a report from the UCO that says you realized you were being watched, that you even fled, drove recklessly, and ran red lights. Someone with nothing to hide and no fear doesn't run when they think the police are following them. The officers intervened immediately due to the risk of escape, and that's when the arrests were made, but you still had time to do one thing. Tell me if it's true or false. Did you erase your phone? You can't even say that, although I understand why you won't answer, because honestly, erasing your phone lately makes people think you're something you're allegedly not. But look, I didn't do anything to Ms. Lair Diaz to take advantage of her. Ms. Lair Diaz didn't erase it, nor were the groups you participated in deleted. Through fully encrypted apps. Tema and Signal. You told the judge that those groups were just groups of friends. Can you repeat that for us today? Were those groups where there were SEPI officials and SEPI executives really just groups of friends? No, it doesn't say that here. Well, it brings me back to the conclusion I mentioned earlier. If you can't repeat here what you told the judge, it's because you lied then and can't uphold that version now, since you must tell the truth. It would be very easy for you to come here and say exactly the same thing you said before the judge at the National Court. Exactly the same. But why do you clear yourself there? He says it's just a group of friends. He says you have nothing to do with the rigging of contracts and the collection of commissions, and here you're not able to repeat the same thing. Because if you repeat it here and it's a lie, you're committing another crime. Let me remind you that you're currently under investigation for fraud, forgery, embezzlement, misconduct, influence peddling, and involvement in a criminal organization. That's no small matter. Que no es poco. You participated, and I'll be quick, in operations where they say the contracts were rigged, and in which Ms. Maria Jesus Garrido and Mr. Parte Arroyo also participated, whom we have already mentioned before. There are also a number of other people under investigation. Here you could perfectly well remain silent. But even so, I'm going to tell you. Let's see if recalling specific operations helps you remember. If you told the judge you weren't involved in them, say so now. Say it to all of Spain, through this commission. Were you involved in Tubos Reunidos rescue? At that time, you worked for Servinabar. Did you have any involvement in that case? Did you communicate with SEPI officials about that operation? And Mercasa? Were you aware of the technical report prepared by your company about its headquarters? Are you not even able to tell me here if you were aware of the reports prepared by the company you worked for? Can you deny that this report contained economic assessments that have later been questioned? And regarding the help you received, Mr. Samper said no, it was a loan. Call it whatever you like, from Arapeles Forestalia. You clearly knew the director of SEPIs who approved the operation. And also Mr. Miguel Cervera Guerrero. I'll go further and say you knew Mr. Antonio Miguel Cervera Guerrero from your time in the Andalusian administration. And later, during your time at SEPI, I wouldn't rule out your involvement in his appointment. Did you keep in touch with him during this period regarding these operations? Did you know the chairman of the Principality of Asturias Business Park Procurement Board? Were you instrumental in awarding a 2.8 million euro contract to a company linked to your circle? To your circle, Mr. Fernando Fernández Guerrero. Look, you chaired SEPI. Since you're not responding, I'll tell you myself. You know their structures. You know their controls. You know that the files had to be processed through the Psychonet system and under the control of SEPI's Directorate for Majority-Owned Companies. What a coincidence, Mr. Partearolo. What a coincidence, Ms. Garrido. You know perfectly well how the system works. You know its filters, you know its procedures. And moreover, you know almost all the people who hold key positions to approve those files. Some of them were also part of your circle of acquaintances. That's why the question is not whether there were controls, which has been repeated to us ad nauseum by Ms. Belén Gualda or even Mr. Bartolomé Lora. No, there were controls. The question is whether the controls were worth anything. The point is that when someone knows the system the way you do, when someone knows the people, when someone has ties to those on the inside, those relationships can make it easier to bypass the controls and make it possible for those files to go through. Look, you can't deny your knowledge of either the system or the people. And I ask you very directly, did you use that privileged position to influence these kinds of operations? Can you at least deny that you facilitated the processing of contracts under conditions that otherwise would not have been possible? Mr. Fernando Fernández Guerrero, we are entering another key moment of this stage. The companies that you used, that your partners used with you, for the circulation of funds and the channeling of commissions. Mediaciones Martínez SL, later called Proporciones Inmobiliarias Kuma SL. Do you know its directors? What relationship have you had with that company? Were you aware that through Mediaciones Martínez, according to the UCO reports that have become known through the media, were commissions or payments allegedly linked to operations carried out with public companies belonging to SEPI? Did you have contact with people linked to this company? First, there is Mediaciones Martínez de SL. Later, you are the sole administrator of another, alias Ana Altera. But it doesn't stop there. I'm not the one asking you. Only because of them? Look, you stopped working for Servinavar on February 7th, 2023, and you established the company Goloso 25 SL. With Mr. José Jojen Martínez Mariscal, an executive at Globaria, and Mr. Raúl Dibea Rincón Filiu. Quite a coincidence, right? In the year 23, you end up forming a company with an executive from Globaria in and Bola Innovación SL, which has registered the cafe you run. You are the administrator of Bola. And the law firm SDP Estudio Legal, which the UCO recorded. And by the way, do you know where, according to its website, its headquarters were in Madrid? Yes, Your Honor, yes. Diego de Leon, 36, 6th floor, apartment on the right. And after all that, Mr. Fernández de Guerrero, there is a matter that cannot be explained. Thank you. The growth of your real estate holdings, look. In 2019, he acquired properties in Marbella. In 2022, 2 more homes. In 2024, a villa in Seville. And in May 2025, another apartment in Marbella. You didn't want to explain the asset increase to Mr. Bernabe before, but now you can. Neither. Well, look, I'll also add properties and shares in real estate in Jaca. Not bad. So you leave CP, there's a period of vacancy, you work at Servinavar, and you end up with real estate assets worth more than 10 million euros. When you bought these things, you couldn't prove that you had earned more than $1 million. I'm done, Mr. Fernández de Guerrero. Today, you could have given many explanations to the numerous questions put to you. You did not do so. You have decided to remain silent. A silence that does not protect you, but instead, if anything, implicates you even more clearly. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, silence speaks louder than words. Here, it reveals everything. It reveals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kemps. Now it's the turn of the mixed group. Ms. Gomez Enriquez, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Fernández, welcome. Today we welcome to this committee Mr. Fernández Guerrero, a man whose career seems to perfectly illustrate the textbook case of revolving doors under suspicion. He became president of SEPI in 2018, brought in by Minister Maria Jesus Montero, only to leave through the back door barely a year later due to the Aznar Aznalcóllar case. But what brings us here today, Mr. Fernández, is not your downfall, but your suspicious professional comeback. After 19 months taking refuge in your civil service post without working, you were hired by Servinabar 2000, a commercial director position that earned you 219,000 euros for barely a year and a half of work. Who wouldn't want that? We're talking about a compensation that, according to UCO investigations, points to payment for influence you never stopped exerting over SEPI. This past December, you were arrested by the UCO, allegedly for being involved in a corruption scheme and charged with membership in a criminal organization, embezzlement of public funds, misconduct in public office, and influence peddling. Mr. Fernández, you left SEPI and then started working at Servinabar. During that time when you supposedly did nothing, how did you make a living?
Madam Senator, I refer you to what I have already said to the gentleman from the Popular Parliamentary Group. I am not going to answer your questions.
Thank you. We would like to know what you lived on. It was almost a year and a half. Did you continue to maintain your standard of living and your lifestyle because you kept working behind the scenes at SEPI with Mr. Laura? Thank you. Thank you. I'm asking you this because the UCO suspects that you never really left SEPI, not even when you quit, nor when you started working at Servinabar. Is what the UCO suspects true? Thank you. Well, in May 2021, he was hired by Servinabar, a small company with a minimum share capital of 3,000 euros, a sole administrator, Anchon Alonso, and two partners, Anchon and Zerdan. A company, Mr. Fernández, that started with 2 employees and grew to 10 with your hiring. That is, you had so much work that they had to hire more people. Who hired you at this company? Who offered you the job at Servinabar? Through whom did you start working at Servinabar? Do you know Mr. Santos Zerdan? Do you know Anchon Alonso? And Larry Diaz? Do you know them? Have you ever met with them? Investigations have confirmed that you, along with Santos Zerdan and Larry Diaz, maintained frequent contact to handle matters related to the scheme. It seems that there are records of meals and meetings between you during the period when the contracts were being rigged. Mr. Fernández, the UCO claims that you were not a real employee, but a ghost employee. Can you explain to us why part of your paycheck allegedly ended up in the hands of third parties linked to Santos Zerdan? To your sister? To your brother-in-law? To your wife? Why did part of your salary end up in this person's hands? The UCO has confirmed that they were paid by Servinabar and other companies in the network without doing any work. You seem distracted before this committee, Mr. Fernández. Are you there, Mr. Fernández? Are you listening to me? Thank you. Why did you choose Servinabar to work for and not the law firm Martinez Cribano in Seville? Why? Was it because they paid you less? Did they pay you more at Servinabar? Did you have more freedom of movement at Servinabar? Could you do other business at Servinabar that in the long run brought you more money? Could you do your business in the shadows? What was your job like at Servinabar? Did you act as an intermediary in bailouts and public aid? Do the companies Tubos Reunidos, Enusa and Mercasa, Correos, and Hipódromo de la Zarzuela, Sapa, Arapele sound familiar to you? Do any of these companies sound familiar to you? Would you talk about the bailout of Tubos Reunidos? Did you speed up the 112 million euro bailout so that the network could quickly get its cut? How much did they get from the kickbacks? What was the total? What can you tell me about Sapa, the Basque Arms Company? SEPI gave it the loan of 48.7 million euros. How much did Sapa pay the network in exchange for receiving that money? Not answering, I'll just say it myself. It paid 145,200 euros to Servinabar between 2021 and 2022. Payments that were made in 2 installments, one of 101,640 euros and another of 43,560 euros. Some transfers that coincided by chance with Sapa's acquisition of a stake in Indra, which had the backing of Sanchez's government through SEPI. What did you do? Did you bail out the company in exchange for commissions, or did the companies pay you in exchange for being bailed out or awarded contracts? All of this, Mr. Fernández, could you do it alone, or did you need collaborators, assistants, advisors? How did you organize your alleged collaborators and assistants to carry out all these bailouts and rig all these contracts? According to the investigation, you were part of a group called Irurok. Who made up this Irurok group? Were you part of it? You, along with Lere Diaz and Anchon Alonso. And do you know what this group leads to? It leads to a scheme. And do you know what the scheme leads to? It leads to the name of the scheme, the Fixer scheme, or the Lere Diaz case, in which you are involved up to your neck. A scheme that used its influence to bail out entities that depended on SEPI and also rigged contracts in ministries in exchange for kickbacks. This scheme you belonged to had operated at least between 2021 and 2023, achieving its goals through public officials. Is it true that your partner Lere Diaz had 2 meetings with Zerdan at the PSOE headquarters on Ferraz in 2024? I'm asking you this question because the contacts were still ongoing then, which means the scheme didn't end in 2023. The scheme supposedly stopped operating in 2024. Is it suspected that you inflated the budgets by up to 50% to channel the commissions? Where did those commissions go, Mr. Fernández? Is it true that some of them were laundered through real estate investments in Marbella and Jaca? That's where your wealth comes from, that's where your lifestyle comes from, and that's where your assets come from. Your alleged corruption scheme, Mr. Fernández, has led, as I mentioned earlier, to the Lere Diaz case, where you, according to the investigation, acted as the technical planner behind rigging public contracts. During their search, the UCO found a drive, your drive, which contains the accounting of the rigged deals, the records, and the evidence of how they steered the files in a very precise way. In addition, you were perfectly coordinated through encrypted messages using the app. Do you remember? Signal and Trema. Today, Mr. Fernández, you have here, in this commission, the opportunity to explain to us whether that drive is a diary of your time in public office or the archive of a criminal organization embedded in the heart of our administration. The National Court plans to lift the seal on your case at the beginning of May. What explanation are you going to give when the seal is lifted soon and it is revealed how you all divided the kickbacks among yourselves? About 731,000 euros for mediating in 2 public bailouts and rigging at least 3 contracts. Thank you. Why were you using this kind of encrypted messaging if what you were handling was legal advice and completely transparent? You used Signal because it was the tool to coordinate with your partners, with Lere Diaz and Anchon Alonso, and that way you could steer the case files that were going to be processed. Instructions were given about which companies needed to be rescued. And Trema was the extra layer of security, and it was used by the trio for the most sensitive conversations about the distribution of commissions and kickbacks. So the Civil Guard and UCO wouldn't catch them, right? You think the UCO is dumb. According to the latest news, the judge has allegedly charged 6 other officials, high-ranking government officials, based on the evidence found in your possession. This leads to an extension that confirms how your influence branched out. Were these your collaborators? I'm referring to José Vicente Berlanga, president of the state-owned company in the USA. Bartolomé Lora, vice president of SEPI, Ángel Luis Novoa, and Juan Manuel Parte Arroyo, executives linked to the management of public funds at SEPI, and officials from ADI and the Ministry of Transport. These people were your contacts, so that his scheme could bypass all public procurement procedures. How did he buy them? What did he give them in return? Because they were putting their jobs at risk. Were you the one in charge of coordinating it? Did you also give him instructions so that the public contracts would end up in the prearranged channel? Does all this mean that your relationship with Servinavar and with the scheme was about an organized infrastructure to loot public funds, taking advantage of your influence in SEPI and your influence in the ministries? Mr. Fernández, among the investigated operations, there is one that involves the financing of 17.3 million euros for Arapelet SL. This company is 100% owned by Forestalia. In the awarding of this project by CEPIDES, the alleged agreed commission was 200,000 euros, according to the UCO investigation. On what basis was this commission of 200,000 euros agreed upon for a CEPIDES loan? How were the commissions agreed? What was the percentage? Was this the toll to pay so that you would release those 17.3 million in public funds to Forestalia? Mr. Fernández, the UCO not only questions your income, but has also detected that your actual level of spending on mortgages, luxury renovations, and property maintenance in 3 provinces far exceeds your known net income. If the numbers don't lie and your civil servant salary isn't enough to sustain that wealth, who paid you the difference? Which company or which fixer ended up paying off your houses in exchange for your favors at SEPI? Mr. Fernández, I'm finishing up, Madam President. Mr. Fernández, when you get caught red-handed, the best thing to do is to keep kneading as if nothing happened, trusting that no one will find out that there's money behind the cake. That's your recipe for looting. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Enriquez. Ms. Caballero has the floor for 25 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning again, Mr. Fernández. We already know each other. You came to the Coldo Commission on July 22, and your participation was the same. Don't speak as you've already been told, Senator from the Popular Group. Don't speak, don't say anything, don't answer anything. I don't know. What happened in between? Well, in between, from when you came until today. Well, things have happened, yes. Quite a few things have happened that don't improve your situation, but I think they definitely make it worse. And where before you wanted to defend the presumption of innocence, now it's quite clear that your silence is a presumption of guilt. You were arrested in December in a scheme that we were hardly even considering in July. And we've learned about many issues that have come up here today. And I certainly think that this silence of yours, I don't know if it benefits you or not, because you'll have to go through the courts and in the end, everything will come out. Right now, all of this we're analyzing is under seal, which is the scheme behind the Iberia scheme. And it seems that soon we will find out. On May 9th, they may lift the seal on the case. What are we going to find, Mr. Fernández? An improvement in your situation? Or a worsening of your situation? What need did you have? Honestly, I would ask you very specific questions that have already come up, but I would also ask you another kind of question, which is why? A person like you, with your background, with your career, having held high positions, high offices, well, in the Andalusian regional government, also being president of SEPI, which I think is one of the highest positions, best paid. I don't think you have any financial problems. What need did you have to get yourself into this mess, I would say? Why did you choose to surround yourself with those people? Or is it that you were already one of those people you've surrounded yourself with? Have you ever been to Pamplona? That's a question I think you could answer without affecting any of your constitutional rights.
Ms. Caballero, with the same institutional respect for you, your group, as well as the senators from the mixed group and the popular group, on the advice of my legal counsel, I will refrain from giving my opinion. I will refrain from answering for the reasons previously stated. Thank you very much.
I'm asking you because you received more than 200,000 euros from a company based in Pamplona, Servinabar, for a 1.5-year contract. I'm afraid that you probably never even set foot in Pamplona or Navarra to sign with this company, which in the end turned out to be a front company that Santos Ferdan had with his partner Angson Alonso, which was used to collect kickbacks from public works. 2% from the projects awarded to Acciona. And from what we can see, they also wanted to be involved in more deals because they were trying to get into other deals. You must be Maria Jesus Montero's trusted aide, her point person. Maria Jesus Montero not only didn't show up here at this committee, but she also vouched for Santos Ferdan, partner and owner of half of Servinabar. But she also said he was a friend. She considered him, after the relationship they had, as the number 2 of the Socialist Party. She considered him a friend and vouched for him. Later, she said he was someone who was no longer part of the Socialist Party and that he had nothing to do with it anymore. But I get the impression that this was the person who helped Santos Ferdan hire you for Servinabar. And you could, well, make that leap to this company and start to, well, collaborate in the shady businesses they've been running. Because if not, what are you doing in a company? Not that you were president of SEPI in a company that was in a location in Pamplona that had no employees, that had no corporate purpose. He had changed it 2 days before, which was dedicated to bidding for projects, but just for projects it bid on jointly with Acciona. I don't know. And all the workers he has had after we found out, all of them have had ties either with Santos Cerdan or with the Socialist Party. And you were there? I would really like you to answer me so I can know if you met the workers and if there was actually anyone working on anything in that office on San Nicolas Street beyond simply serving to pay a salary to Santos Ferdan's sister or Ramon Alzoris's girlfriend, Alzoris being Maria Chivite's right-hand man, or also to the businesses that Chivite has, or also to the businesses that the woman had, beyond Santos Cerdan anyway. I would really like her to answer because for us in Navarra, everything that Servinavar has meant, everything related to Santos Cerdan is a huge scandal. He was the socialist deputy from Navarra, right-hand man of Ferdan. He was the socialist deputy from Navarra, right-hand man of our Chivite. And he just goes around saying that everything that happens to him is because he was a deal maker for government agreements. But we all know that what really happened is that he must have really liked shady deals and money. And that's why he's in the legal situation he's in now. You have also already said so. You were in another business, which was Mediaciones Martinez. He was in that group that they gave a Basque name, Irurok. I imagine that Anchon Alonso must have given it the name because I can't see you naming that group of the three of you. With Anchon Alonso and with Lere Diaz in the term Irurok, a person with such a strong accent from the area where you live. But well, these businesses, Are these businesses helping you make friends all over Spain? And for that, of course, what we're seeing is that what seemed like just a small detail is actually a pretty extensive network, and we're waiting to find out the truth. You refuse to give any information here, but we are increasingly certain about kickbacks linked to different public case files related to SEPI. Yesterday, Mr. Bartolome Lora denied that you had kept the official car, but he did not deny that you kept the SEPI phone after you were dismissed, nor did he deny having had meetings with you, nor that you participated in ongoing cases after you were dismissed. Because he said there had been meetings, maybe because he couldn't deny it, and so, well, he said it was simply to come to an agreement. I wanted you to tell us what the minister said to you when she dismissed you, whether she told you to stay calm, that you would keep your position until they tried to clear your name, or why you were out for 19 months. Fuera. Without appointing you president, or maybe your position wasn't as essential as it seemed. Thank you. It's something I would have liked you to tell us because no one has given us an explanation for something as strange as leaving SEPI without a president for 19 months. At the times when the biggest rescue operations had to be carried out, the most complicated ones. And of course, besides being complicated, they were also surrounded by controversy and suspicion, like the airline bailouts. But we have also learned that the UCO is also focusing on 5 other operations that may have amounted to 750,000 euros of kickbacks for the Sirura group, for the 3 of you, for Mr. Alonso, Ms. Diaz, and you, in which the rescue operation of Tubos Reunidos is mentioned. The one about the public contract from Mercasa in favor of Servinaba, the awarding of a contract to Parque Empresarial Principado de Estudios to Ribery's company, and the ENUSA contract at the law firm Carrillo y Montes, and SEPI's bailout of Arapele, a subsidiary of Florestalia. Did you handle all the contacts with SEPI in these cases to secure these operations? Why did you need Anshon Alonso and Lady Diaz? All of this, the truth is that you are not going to answer it today. But I think that over the course of this commission, we will learn, because there are other people who are answering, and at the same time, the investigations are coming to light. And what I'm telling you is that the pressure on you is getting stronger and stronger, and I understand that your situation is not easy. But you simply decide to come here just to go through the motions, not to contribute, not to cooperate, and I hope that in the long run you will cooperate with justice for your own sake. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caballero. Now it's the turn of the Socialist Parliamentary Group. Mr. Huelva Betanzos, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Fernández. Thank you very much for appearing here today before this committee, although we are really not pleased that you have had to come again for the same old thing again. We have absolute respect for your decision, I won't have to repeat it, that you are not going to answer and will remain silent. It is a right that you believe you have and that we respect without having to get into any kind of presumption about anything. You have ample knowledge of what an investigative committee is, and you're starting to get an idea, since this is your second time here, of what the investigative committees we have here in the Senate are like. The wide range of investigative committees we have here proves it by itself. We're on the 7th one and counting. No one will fool you here. This is your second investigative committee, so you know how things are said. Whether you say what you want here or not, whether you say it or not, your statement is already written over there, your guilt is already written over there, so it doesn't really matter that you're here today. In fact, it doesn't really matter that you're here or that anyone is here any day. Mr. Fernández, you have a law degree from the University of Seville. In 1999, you passed the competitive exams for the legal corps of the regional government of Andalusia, ranking first in your class. And from then on, you held various positions in the regional administration of Andalusia related to advisory roles, management, and control of public spending. In fact, you have held various positions as head of legal advice in different departments of the Junta of Andalusia. You headed the General Legal Advisory Service of the Andalusian Regional Government, and from 2017 to 2018, you held the position of Comptroller General of the Regional Government of Andalusia, responsible for the internal control of public accounting and the economic management of the regional government of Andalusia and all the instrumental activities that make up the junta. I believe I recall, Mr. Fernández, that you voluntarily left the General Comptroller's Office of the Junta of Andalusia to be appointed President of SEPI. By the way, Mr. Fernández, since this is an interrogation and we're all going to ask questions here, I do want to ask you something. The first one. Do you know that the person who succeeded you in the General Comptroller's Office of the Junta of Andalusia was dismissed at the beginning of 2025 because they were considered inconvenient and because they issued more than 15 reports flagging alleged irregularities in contract splitting, and that in the choice of the emergency procedure for contracting, it was allegedly used to handpick who got the contracts? That making those reports was not liked by the managers of the Andalusian public administration, and that person was pushed aside. Mr. Fernández, we believe that your professional profile and your personal track record had a positive impact on you being offered the position of President of SEPI. Because I don't think anyone asked you if you voted or who you voted for before appointing you. Mr. Fernández, do you know approximately how many public employees SEPI has? You won't answer, so I'll say it myself. SEPI has about 200 in its corporation, and the whole group has more than 86,000. 86,000. The President said it here last Monday. Do you think that the President or now the Chairwoman of SEPI are they in a position to manipulate the 200 employees of SEPI so that their reports match certain malicious ideas that the managers of the state industrial holding company might have? I think that if anyone believes that, it's because they do it in their own area of management. I don't want to see that person in charge of anything at all, but I don't think that's very likely to happen. And here I would like to make a remark to the members of the Partido Popular, asking them to stop making insinuations about the commendable work done by thousands of public employees, and more specifically, by hundreds at SEPI. We know that in order to bring down the government, they are capable of anything, but at least don't do it Montoro style. Respect the work of the courts, not just when it suits you electorally, as you are now. In the case of Quinches, for example, respect the work of state-owned companies. And don't try to bring it down by muddying the waters just to gain political advantage. Members, SEPI is a key instrument of the state, and therefore it serves all of us, all Spaniards, both men and women. It contributes to the economic and social development of the country, to the definition of industrial strategy, and to the recovery and strengthening of the business sector, and also to the strategic autonomy of our country in the current uncertain international context, especially in the kind of situation we are facing now. The good work of this organization, SEPI, is backed by the numbers. In 2024, the group achieved a record turnover of 6.355 billion, 7.5% more than the previous year. SEPI Group's exports reached a figure of 747.2 million euros, likewise the trend. The securities portfolio is at an all-time high, standing at more than 14 billion euros as of this date. After 3 consecutive years of profit, with more than 219 million accumulated over the 3-year period, 2024 was the key year for the deployment of strategic capabilities. These positive figures reaffirm to all of us that state-owned companies are a fundamental instrument and play a key role in ensuring financing. the provision of essential services to citizens in the state. But in addition, SEPI has been a fundamental factor in the effort made by this government to alleviate the consequences of COVID. Unfortunately, in this attempt by the right to discredit everything, SEPI is also affected because its work is being called into question. Ladies and gentlemen, the Solvency Support Fund for Strategic Companies, the so-called FASE, has been an instrument essential that has been able to maintain employment, the activity of companies operating in strategic sectors, and that were hit very hard by the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. This instrument has proven its usefulness by allowing temporary support so that these companies could continue their activity. Ladies and gentlemen, this instrument has prevented the loss of more than 60,000 jobs in our country. Only through SEPI has it been possible to prevent 60,000 workers from being laid off, who would have ended up out on the street without a job because the COVID crisis had a very serious impact on the companies where they were employed. Notice this, it's curious, 60,000 a number, what a curious number, which is the same number of millions that the Popular Party gave away to the banks in the previous crisis. No one has ever heard the Popular Party say they should give it back, never. Pedro Sanchez and Maria Azul Montero saved 60,000 jobs with the SEPI, and Rajoy gives away 60 billion to the banks, who were so poor they were begging at the subway entrance. Mr. Fernández, do you know that if there were no regional elections in Andalusia in 2026, which are on May 17, if it weren't this year, this SEPI commission wouldn't exist? Do you know, Mr. Fernández, that if Maria Azul Montero were not the socialist candidate for the Andalusian elections, this SEPI commission wouldn't exist? You are here because you are involved in a judicial proceeding, but let's not kid ourselves. That doesn't matter at all to the Popular Party. You are here because you are someone who has had the bad luck, and I would say the good fortune, to work in Maria Azul Montero's department. What the Popular Party would like to do and doesn't, because it would be a brazen act and a scandal. Though don't take it for granted that they won't, it would be to have Maria Azul Montero sitting there where you are every week. The Popular Party cares about no one but Maria Azul Montero and Pedro Sanchez. You are here because you have to be. This is a commission created ad hoc for the Andalusian elections. And Maria Azul Montero, because she is Andalusian and now because she is the candidate for the Andalusian elections, will be here. We will see if, when the elections on the 17th are over, we will see if, when the Andalusian elections are over, this commission continues at the same pace. Or it stops, or it slows down, or maybe it changes direction and focuses on the government. Look, Mr. Fernández, do you know? You know this because you're a lawyer. Do you know that the Senate is a territorial chamber? Yes, it's a territorial chamber. I'm telling you, in theory, it is. Or when it suits the political interests of the Popular Party, it is. Do you think it would be important in a territorial chamber like the Senate to create an investigative committee on the mass scandal in Almeria, which allegedly involves leaders linked to the Popular Party leadership in Andalusia under Moreno Bonilla? Here, they're not looking for the money. Here, allegedly, they've already found it. Therefore, it would be important to know what's going on there. Do you think it would be important to create an investigative committee on the emergency contracts allegedly misused during the health emergency in Andalusia to enrich those who later lower taxes? Yes, that's important. Senator, get back to the point. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm telling you, you know perfectly well that for a while now, in certain statements and remarks you've made, you've gone off the topic of the debate, which I have allowed, but now I ask you to get back on track. Thank you.
Yes, Madam President. Well, look, yesterday I had the patience to take notes throughout the entire committee meeting. The times, for example, in the conflict of interest between Indra and Escribano, you didn't call attention to it during the election campaign. Excuse me, did you?
No, I'm the one speaking here. Let's see, do you know what Indra belongs to? I mean, Indra, no.
Well, the conflict of interest is not within the commission. Exactly. Pedro Sanchez's election campaign is part of the subject at hand.
That's the point. And I'm the one who decides. No. And I'm the one who decides. Okay.
Okay. So now we're starting to understand each other, Madam President. So now we're starting to understand each other. The Popular Party spokesperson has been speaking for exactly 10 minutes, timed with a watch, talking about the relationship between the witness and the Andalusian regional government. Excuse me, I have the floor right now. About Maria Jesus's relationship, about Maria Jesus Montero's relationship, questions about the Junta de Andalucía, and no one has heard anything. I only have your words, but I'll stick to them. Go ahead. Yes.
You know, it's been fully tailored to the Commission's purpose.
Yes, like the COVID contracts and Pedro Sanchez's election campaign, which will also be read.
Let him continue, or I will take the floor away from him.
I'll continue.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. I'll continue. Yes.
Continue. Do you think that in a territorial chamber like this, a commission of inquiry should have been created about private providers, the private cancer providers in Andalusia, or about Madrid Network? I would like to play the role of a fortune teller, Mr. Fernández, and to know if in the commission of inquiry, which has indeed been created here as a territorial chamber, the one about the state, about the railway network, they will call to testify the person who is still responsible for 112 Sanz, acting regional minister in Andalusia, to see if he reports on how things are being handled. No, wait, hold on. I'm finishing now, Madam President, or I'll keep going.
Mr. Huelva.
Tell me, I already
told you. Please redirect to the purpose of this commission.
I'm perfectly within the scope of the commission. Seriously, I'm rephrasing.
I am...
Rephrasing. Do you hear?
Should I take the floor from you? I've already told you, Mr. Huelva. Please, I don't want to interrupt you or anyone, but go ahead.
Madam President, I ask that you be fair to everyone. I would honestly...
I'm not going to let you say that because it's not true. Well...
Because it's not true?
Mr. Huelva, you said that on the first day and it wasn't true. Continue.
Exactly. I told you that on the first day. Exactly. The purpose of the commission is, I've also been careful to investigate the deficiencies and alleged irregularities in the management of the State Industrial Holdings Company. Precisely yesterday, Madam President, it was discussed yesterday, yes. Is that past, present, or future? At most, it can be past or present, it can't be future. And yesterday, those S2 groups were discussed as something for the future. And you said that it was perfectly within the scope of the Commission. Therefore, I stand by my words. I believe you should be impartial, but I'll finish. Mr. Fernández, you won't find anyone here who will say a bad word about the Popular Party while testifying. Therefore, say whatever you think is appropriate. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huelva Betanzos. Now, as you know, it is the turn of the witness, Mr. Fernández Guerrero, if he would like to make a statement for 3 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Guerrero, Fernández Guerrero.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ms. Caballero, for pointing out my strong Andalusian accent. I'm proud of it and proud to be Andalusian. And I refer back to my initial statement. As a consequence of the current legal situation, not only can I remain silent, but I must do so. Therefore, with all due respect to the Senate, the Chamber, this committee, all the groups, and all of you, I regret that I cannot do anything other than what I have done during my appearance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernández Guerrero. We will now move to remarks from the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups, each with 7 minutes. Ms. Caballero, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I have nothing more to add to this committee. If the witness does not speak, then I have nothing else to say.
Thank you, Ms. Caballero. Mr. Huelva Betanzos, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Fernández, thank you, Madam President. I just want to thank you for appearing here and to express my regret for the spectacle you have to endure in this committee, just as the other witnesses will have to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huelva. Now, on behalf of the Popular Parliamentary Group, Mr. Camps has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, we must not get lost in the details. My group in this committee of inquiry and in all the ones we participate in has only one objective, is driven by only one principle, the search for truth. no matter who it affects, and if in the end it is concluded, let the chips fall where they may. I have taken this last phrase, let the chips fall where they may, from the words of Mr. Gill, the socialist spokesperson on the Coldo Case Committee, for whom, as he well knows, I have enormous personal and professional respect. When one seeks the truth, one asks questions. Mr. Vicente Fernández Guerrero, one asks questions. I have asked you many questions. When one is not seeking the truth, one doesn't ask questions. One doesn't ask questions. Ladies and gentlemen, how many questions has the Socialist Parliamentary Group's spokesperson asked? We have asked, but the issue is not what we have asked, but rather what we have asked. The issue is that you did not want to answer. Then comes silence, Mr. Fernando Fernández Guerrero. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not neutral. Because when the person who appears before this chamber does not clarify, does not deny, does not explain, and does not defend. From your actions, this parliamentary group draws conclusions that arise from the facts and conclusions that arise from the silence in the face of those facts. And the facts, sir, when arranged rigorously, outline a path that leaves no room for doubt. A path that begins, socialist colleagues, yes, in the Andalusian regional government where Mr. Fernández Guerrero, socialist colleagues, yes, begins his political career in the trusted circle of Ms. María Jesús Montero. Wasn't he appointed by Ms. María Jesús Montero as Comptroller General of the Andalusian regional government? That's where his public career began, though it actually started earlier in a ministry's general secretariat. But that's where you take on your main responsibility in the Andalusian regional government. That's where a political relationship of trust is solidified, leading to your appointment as Comptroller General of the Andalusian regional government. And that's the position with which you end your time in the regional government, and from that position, from that already established relationship of trust, is where the next step takes place, socialist members. In 2018, with Ms. Montero already serving as Minister of Finance and Vice President of the government, she is the one who promotes the appointment of Mr. Vicente Fernández Guerrero as President of SEPI. I didn't appoint him, Ms. Montero did. But that appointment, ladies and gentlemen, does not happen in a vacuum. It comes with a prior element that cannot be ignored, the Aznar Aznalcóllar case, which can't be ignored. An existing public case was already on his record when that decision was made. And yet, despite that context, he is appointed, retained, and supported. From all this, a first conclusion emerges. There was a conscious political decision to promote and support someone who was already facing a legal situation that threatened his continued tenure. But Mr. Fernández de Guerrero, the decisive point is not in the origin, no matter how much it hurts the socialist gentleman. It lies in the bankruptcy. October 2019 resignation as president of SEPI, and at that moment, what was required was a clear break, an immediate replacement, an unequivocal removal, a total disassociation. But it wasn't like that. What followed was a vacuum that lasted for months until the appointment of Ms. Belén Gualda in 2021. And that vacuum is not just an administrative procedure, it's the core of this whole story. Because if what happened during that period is not explained, and you have not explained it today, if it is not clarified, if you still had the ability to influence who were you communicating with, whether or not you had access to information, this parliamentary group can only reach one conclusion, that your departure was formal but not real. You lost the position, but not the influence. They took your deed, but not the keys to the house. And that was precisely the space where the shift happened, where new players appeared, Lear Diaz, Santos Zerdan, Ancor Alonso, and where your entry into Servinabar took place. A transition that, if you don't explain it, and you haven't explained it, can only be understood as the projection of knowledge acquired in the public sector into the private sphere, where interests, relationships, and decisions converge that are now under investigation. If the transition isn't explained, who facilitated it isn't clarified, or those relationships aren't justified, the conclusion is untenable. There is no break, there is continuity. A common thread that connects the Andalusian regional government, SEPI, the institutional vacuum, and the subsequent activity in the private sector. And all of this also leads to an element that this chamber cannot ignore. An increase in your personal wealth, which, in view of the facts, is at least difficult to justify. Ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy, those who held power must explain their actions. When they don't do it, it's not Parliament lacking answers, but the witness who is left without political cover. And when that happens, the conclusion no longer depends on what is said. It depends on what you chose not to say today. It depends on the facts that have no explanation at all. And it depends on a silence that doesn't clear up doubts, but rather increases them. Ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy, there is no middle ground between power and responsibility. There can't be. There can't be power without oversight. There can't be influence without accountability. And when all that happens, when the person who is supposed to provide answers chooses not to, as Mr. Fernández de Guerrero has done here today, the obligation of this chamber is clear. Not to accept silence as an answer, and not to normalize what is simply unacceptable. Because revolving doors don't turn by themselves. Someone pushes them, someone keeps them turning, and someone benefits from that movement. And here, ladies and gentlemen, the question is no longer just what the witness did. The question is who made it possible, who appointed him, who supported him, who permitted a lengthy vacancy in the SEPI presidency after his resignation, and who let him keep his influence without a role during that period. A shadow leadership, continuity beyond any oversight. Because if anyone had the ability to prevent it, to stop it, to close it immediately, it was the one who had promoted his appointment. It was the one who knew his background. It was the one who had placed their political trust in you. It was Maria Jesus Montero, and yet that void existed, and yet that continuity was not interrupted. And yet no explanation has been given. The facts speak for themselves. And there's more, ladies and gentlemen. When Belen Gualda is finally appointed, what happens next cannot be ignored either. There are dismissals, internal decisions are made, review mechanisms are activated, and I'll finish with this, and investigations are carried out within SEPI itself. And in light of that, the question must be asked, did no one really know anything? Was no one really aware? Did all of that really happen without the political head of the department having any information? Ladies and gentlemen, we are not stating what is up to the courts. We are highlighting what is politically unsustainable. Because when the facts accumulate, when decisions are chained together, when silences follow one after another, what disappears is not doubt. What disappears is credibility, and the conclusion is inevitable. That no explanations have been given here because they cannot be given. That no course of action has been defended here because they are indefensible. And in the absence of an explanation, what remains is a clear political responsibility that must be assumed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campdebesa. And with the agenda concluded, I would like to thank Mr. Fernández Guerrero for his attendance, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen.